Hello, everyone. I am very excited to be here tonight. I am in Seattle, Washington here, and it has been some pretty crazy weather. I don't know if you all have had any crazy weather so far yet this fall, but we have had just so much rain and wind, and it's just been kind of a whirlwind. But I'm really excited to be here talking about inclusion tonight. And thank you, Cindy, for having the Herring Center come and talk. A little bit about who I am. My name is, again, Kristen Ainsley, and I have been working in special education since 1996. And I worked in preschool classrooms and ECAP and kindergarten classrooms, and I worked a little bit for the College of Education at the University of Washington doing some curriculum writing for Head Start Center for Inclusion. I also am now both a family support specialist at an inclusion center at the University of Washington. It's called the Experimental Education Unit. And I'm also a inclusion specialist with the Herring Center. So I have kind of dual roles. And these are my three teenagers, these scruffy looking kiddos. This is probably a pandemic photo, who knows? But they, it's Friday night and I'm at my house. So who knows? Hopefully it won't be loud, but so the Herring Center has three components to it. We've got our demonstration school, which is called the EEU, which is a strange name. It's called Experimental Education Unit. It was created in the 60s, and really it was all about the knowledge that we knew that children with special needs could learn. And so we created a school that did just that, experimented with new teaching strategies and current research. And what we now know, of course, is that all children can learn regardless of their abilities, regardless of their development, regardless of their circumstances. And the EEU school is just a really exciting place to work because we're still doing research, which is our third part of our Herring Center, and then the professional development and training. So the three parts of this are what the Herring Center is all about. Okay. Today and tonight, we are going to talk about inclusion. We're going to talk about what it is, what it isn't, why we want to include all children in all of our learning spaces. What does it mean to belong? What does it mean to actually belong to a space, to a learning center? And how do we know? How do we know that we belong, that we're actual members of this group? I'm going to talk about a few common barriers to inclusion, because when we first start thinking about inclusion, absolute barriers pop up all over the place, and we're going to try to knock some of those down. And then we're going to have a few strategies to give you to create more inclusive environments. So, inclusive environments benefit all learners. So we're thinking about everyone. They're thinking about children who have special needs, special physical needs, children with neurodiverse learning needs, children with perhaps some social emotional needs, challenging behavior, any sort of special need that might make it difficult for some children, which happens all the time, is that some children are not allowed to be educated and play and learn amongst their peers. And we're going to talk about the benefits, why inclusion, first what it is and why it really does benefit everyone. I'll give you just a moment to read this one definition of inclusion. This was created by the NAEYC and DEC in 2009, so it's quite and ready for an update. But it was created because there really was kind of a lack of standard definition of inclusion that caused confusion in our field. But really what we're thinking of is that access, participation, and support. So that last part there is the most crucial part when we think about it. We want everyone to have access, not only just access coming in the doors, but access to all learning activities in the classroom, access to all routines in our childcare centers. We want all children to be able to participate fully. So is everyone able to participate in, again, all routines, all activities, using all of the materials that we have available? And then what kinds of supports can we provide so that we can increase access and participation? Here's another definition here. This is from the Council for Exceptional Children. You can also read this one right here on your own, but I really like this second part that talks about bringing support services to the child rather than moving the child to the services. So we really want, again, children to play and learn amongst their peers, and we want to be providing the supports needed so the child can learn and play amongst their peers. And we know that there are so many benefits to this for both neurodiverse learners as well as neurotypical learners, so children with and without disabilities. We do know that simply joining children with and without disabilities in the same classroom does not mean we're creating inclusive environments. So just being in the room does not mean inclusion. We can do better than that. We know we can do better than that. I love visuals. I'm a very visual learner. This one, and actually Cindy will go even a step further. I really like Cindy's visual. I'm going to need I'm going to need to use it if you can see Cindy's screen. But thinking about these three areas, these three pictures here. So we've got exclusion. We know we don't want this, right? We know that let's think about the kind of the gray circles in the middle might be the classroom or the learning center. Exclusion means that all the little dots on the outside, not able to come, not able to be in our spaces. Integration, we're getting a little bit better here. We have some neurodiverse learners in the room, in the building, but still pretty separate, right? Perhaps these children are doing something separate with a paraeducator along the side, or perhaps there's a special activity that is designed for certain children and not other children. And then inclusion is really where we want to be. So everyone in the same learning space, using the same materials with perhaps some modifications, perhaps some adaptations. And so thinking about just, if you are working in a center, if you're a teacher or working in a center or an administrator, thinking about taking kind of a mental note, where are we right now with exclusion, integration, and inclusion? And we know that there are so many benefits for our neurotypical learners. These would be children without disabilities, without special needs. So many benefits. We've done so much research, and we are continuing the research that shows us the benefits. So for children without disabilities, there are so many positive social and academic outcomes, both academic, which we, years ago, we may have been surprised by this, but that there's academic outcomes that come with being educated and playing and learning with neurodiverse learners. Positive beliefs towards individuals with disabilities and differences. I was lucky enough to have my 3 children go to the preschool that I was just describing, the experimental education unit where I had worked as a teacher. And one of my children got services there, some special education services, speech services, and they were taught in classrooms for 3 years with just a whole variety of students. And one of the thing, you know, when they first were in preschool classrooms, they might come home and they might ask me, you know, Mommy, why does Penny scream when we play a certain song? Or, you know, why does Johnny go under the table every time we transition to, you know, small group time? And I would just answer them, you know, honestly, hey, you know, first of all, if I don't know, I said, I'm not sure, let's find out about this. But what we talked about was that everyone learns differently and everyone communicates in a different way. And you may use your words to communicate to me and to your teachers. And some children are using different modes of communication. And if if your friend isn't able to tell you how they feel, or that maybe they don't like this song, or maybe that activity is really hard for them, this is how they're communicating right now. They may yell or scream, and it might be unexpected for you, but this is okay because teachers will help them. Teachers will always help them. And I think that the positive beliefs toward individuals with differences has just carried them through. And they're in high school now, and I think we underestimate how important that is to just be learning and playing with children who may be different from us, and give a whole perspective into how people communicate. Of course, empathy, you know, high measures of empathy. Parents of kids in inclusive programs also show empathy. And this is a really important part if we're thinking about families. So the program that I work with in Seattle, and some of the other preschools that are kind of edging toward this in Seattle, is having families really want to be parts of these programs, really wanting their children who may not have any disabilities or special needs to be educated and play and learn alongside children who do have learning differences. And it's just you know, programs that parents really want to be a part of. And so again, the beliefs, positive beliefs toward individuals, positive beliefs towards children with differences, families are incredibly benefited by this as well. Benefits for our neurodiverse learners are just, you know, skyrocketing. So many benefits for our neurodiverse learners to be playing and learning alongside their neurotypical peers, children without disabilities. Children without disabilities are modeling play, language, all day long, social problem solving all day long alongside them. And so we're thinking about all of these benefits: higher academic scores, higher communication. Children learning from each other is just so crucial in just those improved social skills, higher social acceptance within communities, more opportunities for friendships, for real, true, deep friendships happen in these integrated and inclusive environments. And then again, families of children with disabilities can feel much greater sense of connectedness and belonging when they are welcomed into programs. So there's, again, better preparedness for elementary school and even secondary school. We know that even preschoolers who are playing and learning together, neurodiverse learners and neurotypical learners, playing and learning together in the preschool age really does help for better preparedness for elementary and even secondary school. So high school and beyond is really measured by their children's preschool experience. And again, we'll go back to these three really key words: is access, participation, and support. So for all of our learners in inclusive settings, we're talking about providing whatever the students need to not simply be in the same space, which was sort of that middle picture, but to have access to all the learning activities at the right level of supports needed to fully participate alongside their peers. So examples might be access, thinking about a child may need an ability to move around a little bit more in a program or a learning center. Maybe there's some different types of seating or a little more space when we're all close together. Maybe there's, for participation, maybe we're thinking about children who are using pictures to understand a direction or a verbal kind of, here's what we're doing in this activity, and we might show some pictures. Tomorrow, we're going to really go into a lot of pictures and visual supports, but that's kind of what I'm thinking of. And support, when we're thinking of support, we can think of this as both support for the child, for providing supports for a child in the programs, but we can also think about ourselves as educators and childcare providers also needing support to be able to provide access and participation to all children. So what kind of supports do I myself need? And who can I reach out to? Can I reach out to community agencies to support? Can I reach out to administrators for support? Can I reach out to family members? Family members are an incredible wealth of information when it comes to how to support their child along with other children. So why do we want to include? We want to include because we want to serve diverse learners. Think about diversity in a whole bunch of different ways. Think about language, ability, gender, race, ethnicity. We know that inclusion works. Again, we talked about this earlier. Children with secure relationships and positive school experiences early on in childcare and preschool settings do better in school as they go on into the upper grades. And we know that our education systems can be inequitable. And every child deserves to have access to high quality educational programs. We know that segregation is common for children with disabilities. Many young children are denied access to local preschool and childcare programs and placed into separate classrooms or not allowed to participate in childcare or preschool settings at all. Maybe they are not able to go to neighborhood programs. Maybe they need to drive quite a ways to find services for their 2, 3, 4-year-old child. We know that children who are more significantly impacted by their disability have even less opportunities to be included, despite evidence that inclusion is beneficial to all children in the program. So what can we envision? What does this look like in practice? What can we envision for all of our learners? We want to know that all of our children and families and staff, again, we're thinking about our childcare staff and providers, and that everyone is feeling supported. So we're going to do some work around that, providing the instruction that children need to learn new skills. So it's not just, again, being in the room, but it's the teaching that comes along, the teaching of the new skills. And then we really want to have this in our minds that inclusion is a right. Everybody should have the right to be included in all spaces, just as we all as adults know that we have the right to enter into any space, children also have the right to enter into any space, and they should have that right. It's not just a privilege for some children who can, behave the right way, or who can learn the way that we think that children learn. It's not just a privilege for some. It should be a right for all children. And we are going to watch a video here. This is a teacher that I have worked with in the past, and she's talking about some ways that she has included children in her preschool program. And Cindy, you can give me a thumbs up if you're hearing this video on your end.
And talk about and highlight the strengths. And so for her, one of her strengths is that she knew so many numbers and letters at the start of the year, and she was really skilled with those. And so using the opportunities during circle time where I knew she already knew this was going to be the number 10. And if I showed it, she was going to know the answer. And I showed it and I was like, wow, did anyone else know that answer? She knew that already. How cool is that? And highlighting those, and even though it's staged and it feels planned, it's really intentional, because you want to show students that just because someone might not speak the same way, or just because they might not communicate the same way, doesn't mean that they don't have skills that you might not have yet. And it really helps with that growth mindset amongst the whole class of saying, this student is working on using the talker to communicate, and we're going to add these words, and she can't say all of these words yet, but she might know numbers 1 through 20, and you might not know those numbers yet. And so that kind of helped establish, I don't like those.
This is a very rough video. I forgot about that little part when this teacher was telling us about this, so I'm going to just skip ahead for her so she doesn't see herself in the rough video.
So I think providing these opportunities can be really helpful in helping disintegrate that visual that students have of their peers when they come in at the start of the year. One step at a time, you're able to kind of break down these stereotypes they might already have, because they're 3 and they don't know any better. And so that's kind of the opportunity that you have, is providing these opportunities for students to show their knowledge and to really showcase their strengths, so that we can see these kind of building blocks of these stereotypes, or of these anticipations of their friends' abilities, come down one by one. Okay. So when thinking about supporting a general education teacher and having students with special needs in their classroom, I think the biggest piece of advice and the biggest support you can do for that student would be to incorporate their interests. I had a student this past year who loved deep ocean life and was a marine biologist in the making. He knew all the levels of the ocean. He knew so many deep sea creatures. He knew their names, their scientific names, their class. He knew so much. And what we did with that in our classroom is incorporated that into the discovery area. So there was lots of different pictures that peers could use him as a resource and say, I don't know how to pronounce this. Can you tell me? And he wasn't quite ready to read, but he knew them all by sight. So he could say, oh, that's an anglerfish, or that's there was a specific type of deep sea octopus that I learned about, but I've forgotten the name. But he was a really great resource for his peers. And I think that is the easiest way to incorporate a student with special needs who might have more specific interests into the classroom, is figuring out how you can incorporate that into whatever content that you are teaching. And I think if it's a student who is more impacted by their disability, what you can do is learn their strengths, really pay attention to what their family tells you they can do in different settings. And so if at home, they love doing number puzzles, or maybe perhaps they're really fluent on using their talker to communicate their needs and wants, you can program their peers' pictures into their talker on the first day, so that they can communicate and they can just simply either just say their name or begin asking their peers for things from the start. You can program different things in the classroom into their talker before they get there. So if you know you're going to have certain things on the first day, they're not having to sit and wait for you to take pictures of everything in the classroom and program it in for a button. You already have that ready. Or maybe it's picture symbols, or maybe it's just a picture board of different areas of the classroom, and they can point and show you what they want to play with. Just thinking about how you can make sure that when they enter the classroom, they have the same access to materials and the same voice that their peers might have.
All right. Thanks for watching that video. I really like how she describes several scenarios. And I really like at the beginning, especially how she is really intentional of how she's asking questions to a child who may have special needs in the classroom, and asking a question that she knows this child knows, and that this is a strength and an interest for this child, in order to highlight that for the other students. So she's not only uplifting that child in answering questions that they already really know and like, but the other students and the other children in the program are seeing this child as someone who has a lot of knowledge. And that's really intentional. That's really intentional, which I really like how she talks about that. Okay, so thinking about what do we know about inclusive environments? Inclusion means everyone. And let's just take a moment, think about this question for a moment, wherever you are. What does inclusion mean to you? You know, inclusion can also be sort of a state of mind as well. In thinking about, you know, when we're doing this work, a lot of this work is sort of hearts and minds work. It's not about a space. It's not about a room. It's not about a building. It's about the feeling that we want everyone to have and to feel. Great expectations for my child, embracing people with differences, presuming competence. Great. Yeah, it is all of these things. Thank you. Inclusion means they're accepted, expected to be there, and part of. Absolutely. So this, we keep those coming too, if you're still thinking and want to write. This quote here is, this first one on the left is one that I've seen for many years here. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And this has been around for a little while. It's a quote by Verna Myers. And I really like to take it even a step further, in thinking that then belonging is being asked to give input into the music choices, what food will be served at the dance, feeling welcome to ask someone to dance with you, or just feeling the freedom to dance all by yourself. So instead of waiting for someone to ask you to dance, planning the party, what kind of food, what kind of music, I'm just going to dance by myself, or I'm going to ask someone to dance with me. So thinking about, again, inclusion is a right. Inclusive education was built on the foundation that all people have the basic human right to belong. Again, we all know that we have every right to be in any space, and children should too. Children and families should too. So, like as I said, inclusion is really a frame of mind. If we want to do this work, we will find a way to do this work. Absolutely, we can find a way to do this work. And if we've taken some small steps towards inclusion, let's take another step. Let's just take baby steps until we get to a place where we feel we can fully include all children and all families. It's a commitment. We might make this commitment. I'm going to commit to inclusion. It's an ongoing process of creating and cultivating an equitable learning community for all children and families. So we know that there are some barriers, some things that come up for us when we think about inclusion, when we think about including all children, all learners, thinking about availability and access of programs. So depending on where you live in the country, where you live, and even in the state, there are perhaps not as many programs available that are inclusive. We know that there are perhaps knowledge and training for staff, perhaps is not always available. in all parts of, again, the country, the state, the region. Some of the barriers, again, one would be attitudes towards inclusion. So it's just oftentimes there are barriers in, again, the hearts and the minds of just, this is not perhaps something that I can do right now, and this is not something that our program is ready to do. But that's the kind of work that we need to do, we want to do, and we want to get rid of that sort of barrier of thinking we can't do it. Resources, absolutely, and administrative support, absolutely. Those are also barriers. So those are, again, things to reach out to resources, community resources that could provide training, support, resources for programs to be more inclusive. And when we think about, again, when we're thinking about the barriers, we're thinking about barriers to inclusion, we may have sort of that fixed mindset. So we may only see one way to do things. We may only see one type of child who may be able to be in our programs. And we might not be able to move past those barriers. We might be stuck in sort of a fixed mindset. But when we practice, when we have more of a growth mindset, we can really see other perspectives, and we can see where the potential is to welcome all children and families into our program. And it might be uncomfortable and we might make some mistakes, but if we're open to the possibility of welcoming all children into our programs, then it absolutely can happen. In terms of other barriers, let's put into chat right now too, what are some things that come up for some of the people in this group? What are some barriers that you've either heard about or you've experienced? What are some things that come up here?
Kristen, have you heard, I don't know if you can hear me or not,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you've heard the new disability etiquette. You know how they used to say, don't stare. You'd have parents telling their children, don't stare at the child with a disability. And the new disability etiquette is smile and say hi. So it's to turn the don't stare to engage, smile, and say hi. I think that's really helpful for students to understand too, because they may have been told by a parent, don't stare, don't engage. And I think that's a big tool in an early learning center. You have to demonstrate how to make friends.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Cindy. That's great. I love that. I love that it's now smile and say hi, and engage. Engage is such a key word for all of this work. Thank you for that. I love that. Yeah, so much of it was, don't talk about it, don't ask questions. And now let's ask questions, and let's ask this person, and let's ask this family, what does your child love? What do they like? What makes them feel excited? What do they look like when they're excited or unhappy? And what kinds of ways can we engage with your child this way? So, all right, let's see. Here's a few more barriers. Lack of staffing. Yep. Staffing. Yep. Staffing is a big one. And so, yeah, that's, and funding, of course, and what we're facing right now in Seattle, and I'm sure all over the state, is a real lack and a shortage of childcare workers, preschool teachers. At the school that I work at, we just had, the principal was subbing in a classroom the other day, and I myself, as a family support worker, I'm often in the classrooms these last few months because, we've got people coming in and maybe they've gotten a vaccine and they're having some reactions, or they are, having some symptoms, and we've got to be so incredibly careful right now. So it is absolutely, it absolutely is a barrier, is staffing. Let's see here. Yeah, breaking this up for this is how it's supposed to be done attitude, right? Let's throw that out the window. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for if anything, it's a welcoming environment, saying we want you here, and partnering with families to say, let's do this together. Let's make this work for your child. And let's partner together to ensure that you feel welcome and that we are going to really try our best. Training is huge. Absolutely. Haven't had the training. So thinking about, again, the resources that are available in wherever the center is. Sometimes the training can come in a multitude of ways. There's lots of resources that have, professional development and training, that we're going to share some resources with you too, that can help support some videos that can be watched, even just to see what a classroom looks like that has, that's inclusive. And then, Cindy, I'm going to ask you a quick question. What kinds of, for your agency, is there anything like that available in terms of trainings or videos or resources?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Parent to Parent as an organization, it's actually a program under the Walla Walla Valley Disability Network. We have actually Angie Witt, she's our parent to parent coordinator on the session tonight. We've done a training in Walla Walla called With a Little Help from My Friends. This been targeted toward middle school and high school students as a way to talk about what is autism, what is Down syndrome, what is cerebral palsy. It's a way to bring attention to these disabilities that a lot of the kids have never heard anything about. It really helps to keep it open and informative, but there's some activities that the kids can do that lets them see for a short period of time what it might be like to have dyslexia or a learning disability. It's just a way to broaden kind of the horizons or the views of the students. We can also come in and do more of a staff training as well. And the YMCA has invited us to do a staff training there. And we just take the same elements of information around autism and Down syndrome and some of the more not standard, I don't know how to explain it, the more prominent disabilities in our community, and have real discussions about what that is. So yes, please lean on the Disability Network and Parent to Parent to bring some information to you around specific disabilities. And like Kristen has just said, there's plenty of videos online that you can seek and we can help you find that might make some of this fairly easy to access.
That's great. Thanks, Cindy. Yeah, I think that the thing about, again, having that growth mindset versus that fixed mindset is seeking out some things, some resources that could be helpful. So again, I'm going to put in a Google Drive in the chat. And actually, maybe I will just take, as we're talking right now, maybe I'll just do that right now. And there's lots of resources out there. And yes, it does, there is some different teaching and learning teaching that, needs to happen, and different resources and supports to put into place for children with special needs, oftentimes communication. We're going to go over, again, lots of those tomorrow, but we can talk about some of those even tonight. And so training and resources, there is a lot out there for free too, that we can point you to. Yeah, training, people are talking about more training. Thinking about, fear, that definitely, the lack of ability to think kind of outside the box. What could this be? What could this be? And could I have two activities going on at the same time that are a little bit different? And is that okay? one activity might be attractive to a certain child or certain children in the classroom, alongside other activities that might give more challenge for some students or some children. So really thinking about different differentiated teaching. And one of the things that I've been training on a lot recently is the universal design for learning, so UDL, and thinking about how can we set up our spaces before anyone even arrives in the playing and learning space. How can I set that space up and that environment up so that it would have a variety of options available for all of the children who come into my space? So can I set up the meeting time area or the circle time area that may have a variety of seating options? Or can I change my expectations a little bit so that at circle time, not everyone has to sit crisscross applesauce? Can I have some children laying on their bellies? Some children sitting on maybe a wiggle seat, maybe children sitting in a chair. Just thinking about that one activity and how many options can I provide that could really provide access for children to participate even more. Let's see here. This is great. Yes. So yeah. I really like what Angela just also put in chat. It's okay to make mistakes, because mistakes are going to happen. And that's where that partnership with families comes in and is so crucial. And again, that's where that feeling of, we want you to be here. We really want you to be here, and we're going to work with you to make this work. And if we just don't start with that, if we start with a conversation with a family that maybe sort of this is going to be really challenging and we're not quite sure how this is going to work, and we're not sure if we can serve your child, right away it just puts up some walls between the family and the practitioner that is really hard to get past. But if we come in starting conversations with families in places where we want this to work, we're incredibly committed. We may not have had a child like yours in our building, but we want your child here and we want to make this work. So I think coming in at that point and with that sort of mindset, again, that growth mindset, can be the first step. All right here. So inclusion is not a certain classroom. Inclusion is not a certain building. It's not a set of teaching practices. It's not a set of strategies. It's not a placement. There's so many things that inclusion isn't. And sometimes when we think of, what inclusion is and what inclusion isn't, again, thinking about that visual at the beginning, it's not just putting children in the same room together and hoping that all children will get something out of it. It's wanting this to work and being really intentional about, we are going to be an inclusive site and we're going to make this happen. Okay, so inclusion is an equity issue. It absolutely is an equity issue. Equity can have lots of different definitions depending on the context, but at its core, it really involves giving everyone the specific tools they need to be successful. I mean, that's what we think about when we think about equity, when we think about what we need ourselves as adults. Are we visual learners? Do we need things written down? Do we use ourselves? Do we use planners? I wouldn't be anywhere without writing things down, especially as I have teenagers and life and getting up there, a little bit older in my years. I have to write every single thing down. And if someone tells me something, that just them telling me is not going to have it, really stick in my brain, right? So right now I need a support. My support is writing everything down, keeping my calendar with me at all times. So why do we not want to provide those kinds of easy supports for children as well? Can we provide some pictures for children with a verbal direction that we're giving? So it is an equity issue. And if we think about it that way, it can help us think about inclusion in a different way. So there is a really cool a set of tests. It is called the Implicit Bias test. And this is from Project Implicit, and you can Google this. It's out of Harvard University, and they've been doing this for a little while, and they're very easy to take tests. When we think about implicit bias, when we think about the biases that we have, we are thinking about biases in terms of perhaps race, gender, ability, and that is sometimes a barrier for us when we are including all children and families in our programs. So where do our biases, we need to reflect on where do our own biases take us or don't take us? What kinds of things are we rejecting without even realizing that we're doing it? So this set of tests, you can click on any area. You can click on, let's say age, for instance, and you can just click through pictures, and it's just a sort of in your mind, it's almost like a good, bad. I think it's just that of just like click, click, or desirable or undesirable. Anyway, click, 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 and you get to the end and you say, and you get a score and you think, okay, well, maybe I have, a bias in this area or bias in this area. And there's just maybe, I don't know, 10 or 15 different categories. So when we're doing this work, we really, really want to think about being reflective on what kind of biases are we carrying with us, and how is that reflected in our attitudes towards inclusion. We're going to watch.
Sorry, Kristen, before we move on, there's been a couple of mentions in the chat room, our chat box, and I just want to bring them to your attention. One is from Esther, and it's just more about higher grades. If everything is so focused on academics and you have less time for socializing and playing together, it's more difficult to fully include students who are still learning to count to 5 when their grade level peers are learning fractions and divisions. So just, how can this inclusion work when there's a bit of a divide in learning? And I think that was agreed. Kathy Collier also agreed with her on that statement. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in the upper grades, when we're thinking about including, we're thinking about, the planning part is so crucial. And if we have a really wide gap in terms of children's abilities, in terms of academics, where are the points throughout the day where we can all be learning together, and can we do some individualizing that is done up front? So again, that's where I'm thinking of sort of those universal design for learning thoughts. And I can actually, I don't think that that's on our resource, but I'll put at the end, I'll put some things in the chat to really help with universal design for learning. But can I design an activity that may reach multiple students with a content? So perhaps there's a student who is working on multiplication, and then there's perhaps a student who has a separate work that's working on something a little bit lower, and it's not necessarily about creating something different for all students, but kind of a menu that could be used for students making choices of what is their level. And I think when we get up into upper grades, high school, middle school, even elementary school, I think the really upper grades, sometimes it can be trickier for those high academic skills, and we have to do some more individualizing. In elementary grades, we can absolutely make some plans before children arrive. And if we do take some pre-planning, planning is a huge part of this work. It really, really is. And so there's a lot of our partners that we work with at the Herring Center. And again, I'm going to just make a little note because I'm thinking about all these things I can put into chat here.
And Kristen, I was just thinking too, my daughter is 18 and has spent a lifetime in classrooms that when the topic was too difficult, she was handed a princess coloring sheet. So we have a whole coloring, a box filled of coloring sheets of princesses. I just want to just think that a teacher can be thinking of the content. Let's say we're talking about the 4 stomachs in a cow, and it's very in depth on the anatomy of a cow. You could at least give a coloring sheet that is of a cow and talk about what a cow eats and what color is the cow. You can simplify a lot of things in ways that it is still learning of a topic and the content is similar without being as deep as some of the other students are learning. And then there's another comment too. And yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I really appreciate your perspective, Cindy. Keep going.
Well, yeah, princess coloring sheets, those should just be no. The next question here was around private schools and resources available there. And I don't know if you wanted to take a look at that. It was from Robin.
Yeah, let's see, private schools and resources. How kids access services in these schools. Yeah, so private schools, so Cindy, the first thing you were talking about, absolutely. So one school that I'm working with, an elementary school, there's a student who has a much lower academic skill level than his peers. But this is a private school that I'm working with, and it's a really small private school. And so they don't have necessarily a resource room or a place like that. They have tutors. But what we've worked with this teacher on doing is, really working with this student on perhaps their math worksheet or their math activity has 3 problems where the other students have maybe 20. And they're a lot bigger for this student because their fine motor skills are not as well developed yet as their peers. And so it takes them a lot longer to form their letters. And so the skills that they're working on may be a little bit lower. It's still math, it's still numbers, it's still working that. And it really did not take the teacher a lot of time. She might think about, okay, this is my lesson for the week. And I'm just grabbing this, first grade. He was actually more at a first grade level in 4th grade math. And so she's just grabbing that, photocopying those along with, and actually just covered up a piece of paper on the page, and it just made it really easy. She just stuck them all in folders. And so anyway, he did not have to be removed at any point from the classroom. So that was a really key part of how that one worked out.
I do think some of the best inclusion happens in smaller districts where they can't segregate, where there's not the resource room or the special ed teacher to rely on, where they are in the classroom and it's teachers teaching to all the students and not a teacher expecting a paraeducator to teach that child. Because we've been told too before that, no, the para is the teacher for that student.
That's absolutely, that's absolutely true. And I think that is sometimes a benefit of those really small schools or small districts, because so many times I'm in schools and it's just, those are your kids and these are my kids. And, a child with special needs, a child with a learning disability, perhaps is seen as someone else's child or someone else's student. And so, and thinking about private schools, so there are, private schools can absolutely, I'm working with a private school right now and it's small and they don't have a lot of resources. but they are just making a commitment to it. And so it's really about all of the professional development. There's a lot of resources that can be found that can be done during, staff meetings or at the beginning. And it's the administration really saying, this is the school that we are now. We include students. We have when we're going to, make it work. And I think that it could be, again, the planning that goes into the classroom material, whatever grade that is, the planning that goes into setting up the environment, and then the planning that goes into, is there a speech? Sometimes there's a speech service that can be brought in, or to, I'm just thinking of the schools that I work with. Sometimes, speech therapy can be brought into a private school, or, and I think you're right that there's not as many resources available in terms of public education. There's a lot more that is sort of mandated. This is what we have, but in terms of private schools, it's really about making that commitment and finding the resources and training, and how can I make this activity work for 3 or 4 different types of learners.
And Kristen, I would say too that the beauty of the pandemic is that we went virtual in some ways, and parents were more aware of the level of their children's development. I would say that our child, we didn't know at what level, but we thought, let's try her at 2nd grade learning, and she excelled. And I think we sometimes want to make it so special and different, when really you can rely on what is her grade level aptitude or his grade level aptitude, and have learning materials at that grade level, and have it still the same topic like you were discussing, but rely on some curriculum that's been around for a long time that could still help our students.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And thinking about, just getting really creative in the ways that we can modify work. And I worked with a teacher who was really resistant to doing that, thinking that this would be sort of giving the student the answer, or making it too easy for somebody, or, if you can't keep up, then you really can't be in this class. And so I worked really carefully with him to think, okay, this is not about giving a special prize or taking it easy for a student if there's like a writing assignment and they're looking at literary forms, or and the student is not yet there. Thinking about how can we make, it's okay to make different assignments. It's okay to make different materials, or, say, hey, write about something that you're really interested in, because what is the goal? The goal was the writing, not necessarily, again, it's all about being creative and pre-planning, and getting a team of staff on board with you, and thinking that, if you're the only one who is providing this service, or this, or you're the only one who really wants this inclusion to happen in your school, are there other people in the school who also really want this to happen? And can you get a team of people together so you're not just on your own? I don't know if I've answered enough of that question, but I really appreciate them coming. I'm going to take a sip of water. Okay, so thinking about membership and belonging. And again, Cindy, thank you for looking at the chat. I really appreciate it. And please just highlight what's coming in, because this is an exciting conversation. Thinking about even just having children belonging in the classroom, taking on roles and responsibilities. Do we have children's names and photos in the spaces? Are all children represented in, let's say, our job chart, or giving children independence and roles for all of the spaces that we're in, belonging, being an actual member of the classroom? It's really where I would say the rubber hits the road, because that feeling of membership and belonging, and we all know when we go into spaces where we might not belong, we not get the feeling that we belong, right? We know that we are in a space that we feel maybe a little uncomfortable, or maybe we wish that we felt more like a member of this, group, whatever it may be, and thinking about what is it that makes us feel like an actual member of the group. As adults, we can really promote a sense of belonging and membership. We can plan for participation in all activities. And again, this goes from preschool all the way up to high school. Planning, and yes, it does take planning. It's not something that just happens. It's not, again, something where we just have children in the same room, students in the same room, and it just happens. We do really have to plan for this. And that can sometimes be a barrier, is that planning piece. We want to keep expectations really high. We don't want those princess coloring sheets when we don't need those princess coloring sheets. We want to keep expectations high. So if there is a lesson that's involving an academic task, what small part of that can we have our students do who are maybe not up at that level? What part of that, the essence of that lesson, can we break it down into smaller pieces? Can we do it over a few days for some students? We want to focus on learners' strengths. What is the strength? Just as Taylor was talking about in that video, what is the strength that this student may have that I can really highlight and tap into? Does this student really know a lot about a certain topic? Is this student incredibly friendly? Does the student love to make friends? And can I partner the student up with somebody else? Modeling positive responses when asked about individual differences. So how can we talk about difference in positive ways, and just how we talk about, other things? Can we talk about difference, that this is just a part of life, is just having differences around us, and that's okay, and that's wonderful, and we can ask questions, and we can be curious about another person. Sometimes just modeling those responses for the children that we work with and other students in class is really important. So observing learners' responses and providing support when needed. That's really, again, it's complex, but it's simple. What are the responses that I'm getting from a student, and what kind of supports do they need? What kinds of things can I change or alter or modify? Can I make small changes that might have a really big impact on a student's participation and engagement? We want all children to be active participants and not just observing the lesson. It's not good enough just to have observing, again, that visual that we talked about earlier. So what does it mean to belong? We all know what it feels like to belong. What does it feel like when you are belonging to a group? Think about that. I'm gonna keep going on, but I want you to just think about that. What does it mean for belonging? Again, thinking about roles and responsibilities just in the classroom. Does everybody have a role and responsibility that they can do? Can it be, can you have more complex roles and responsibilities in the classroom, and maybe some roles and responsibilities that are a little bit simpler? Can we intentionally promote a sense of belonging and membership by focusing on strengths and setting up the environment? So setting up our classroom environment is so crucial, so that we can have children who can physically participate in all of our spaces, and that it's organized and ready to go. And that universal design for learning pieces are really important in this area. So I am really seeing a lot happening in chat. that we could keep talking about. And let me just get to a couple more here, and then I can show some resources. One thing that I really like to talk about is, do you have a mission and vision for inclusion? When we think about what we want our new spaces to look like, can we think about creating a classroom mission or a school mission for inclusion? So when I was a teacher, and many of you as teachers and educators, we create our rules and expectations for the students, right, in our classrooms. And maybe we have 3 big rules for our expectations for our classrooms or our buildings. But I never really created my own mission statement of what the mission of our classroom and the vision of our classroom. And there is, I'm not sure if it is in our Google Drive resources, but thinking about there's easy ways to create your vision and mission. So it could be writing out, Kristen's, preschool classroom. This is how we want it to feel, and writing down words how we want, all staff together, how we want this classroom to feel when students come in the door, and how we will ensure that happens. And then actually writing that out and maybe posting it or sending it to families. And when we write out our mission for inclusion, it really makes it salient, and it makes it something that we want to strive for. And just having that mission statement, you could decorate it, you could put it on a poster, you could have it sort of a living document where maybe it's changing and evolving as you grow as educators. But just really putting it outwardly facing. Has anyone ever done sort of a mission statement for inclusion with the programs that they work with? And just curious about that.
It's so important too sometimes just to ask folks that are disabled. I just think you always want to make sure you can include them. What spaces do you feel welcome in, and what is it about that space that is welcoming? So I think you need to also ask those that have maybe not felt like they belong, what was the difference maker? Because I think that once we know what that is, that makes it really easy then to devise a mission or a vision statement.
Absolutely. It just makes me think, Cindy, of there's, if you're somebody who is on Instagram or Facebook, Instagram and even TikTok, which I just got introduced to TikTok by my daughter, which now I can't stop looking at it. But TikTok and Instagram have amazing resources, amazing people in the disability community to follow, and to just see what people who are in the disabled community, people who identify as disabled, what they're saying about what it's like for them and what they would prefer people, how people interact with them and what they've gone through. And there's you can kind of just search and just get taken on different, here and there, disability advocates. And it's just a really cool way, I think, for us to really see and hear immediately in live real time, what people in disability community are thinking about. Just kind of some takeaways for tonight, really moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. I mean, it is all about making that commitment that we can do this, that we want to do this, that we want to move the needle from not including to including. We want to really reflect on our biases. That is just a key part of this work, is what is it that is making me not want to see past the barriers, and could it be that I have some biases that I want to take a look at and I want to get rid of, and I want to acknowledge we all have biases. And then what are the necessary supports that I can provide? And sometimes that feels overwhelming. But what are some really small things that I could do, in my classroom? Who can I talk with about this work? Who do I want to go to tomorrow or Monday and talk to about this work? And where might I get started? Maybe I'm getting started with some of the resources again that we're going to provide in this Google Drive. Maybe I'm getting started by reaching out to Cindy and the Disabilities Network. Maybe I'm getting started by just again, talking with and learning from people in the disabled community about what their experiences have been. Maybe I'm going to reach out to families and just hear about what are some things that I can do to further this work and to, really take it from where it is now to the next step. All right, so think about it, making an action plan as well. What are some things that you're excited about that we talked about? What are some things that you kind of sparked an idea or sparked some inspiration and thinking about really wanting to commit to this work? What might you do? Again, I always like to think about, who am I going to talk to about this? Who am I going to tell, hey, I went to this talk on Friday and this is what I came away with. And here's what I want to do that's different than what I'm doing now. And then again, we talked a lot about what resources and what resources, because absolutely this is work that is not easy. It's not simple. And there's resources out there. So along with some of the other resources, this is this is really thinking about the younger, for younger children in classrooms. But thinking about something like this is kind of a nice place to start, and thinking about, like, do all the children have classroom jobs or responsibilities? Or during regular activities, are all children in a similar position to their classmates? And is there something that all children know how to use and can do independently in each learning center? So again, thinking about younger children for this one, but this does kind of give a nice idea of, where am I? Where is my program in terms of inclusion? And going down through this, you can think about making notes and describing, like, let's say number 6. So teacher facilitates classroom friendships. What strategies do teachers use to facilitate friendships? What kinds of friendships exist? Friendships throughout the classroom are evident regardless of disability label. So this kind of checklist is a really nice place to start, to just kind of get a barometer of, where am I right now? And maybe there's some things that we're doing really well, and there's some things that we might want to work on. And maybe we just pick 1 or 2 areas that we might want to boost up and find more resources about. Let's see if there's something else here that I might want to show. Okay, yeah. I'm going to go to this preschool inclusion self-checklist. Here's another one that, again, might be helpful to kind of get started. Interactions, thinking about specialized supports, families, inclusive services. So where am I, and where is my program right now in terms of providing inclusive supports? Let's see if there's something else that I want to talk about. Yeah, I think I'll just stop that for the moment. I want to actually, before I do that, I'm going to pull up one thing here. I'm going to pull up Head Start Center for Inclusion. So this is a website, Head Start Center for Inclusion. And this is a website that will have lots and lots of different visual supports. So these can be used in multiple grades, but maybe preschool to early elementary. And these are free downloadable visuals. As you can see, I'm just clicking on one and it comes up. And
What was the website called?
yeah, so the website is called Head Start Center for Inclusion. So just thinking about, this is just one example of, pictures and visuals that would be easily downloadable and free. Block building, let's say in block areas. So here's some ideas for students to build. Do you want to build a tunnel? Can we build a garage, a playground, a zoo, a school? We also have lots and lots of pictures for making friends, different foods, emotions, teaching emotions. So that's a great one to look through and look around. What were some other things that I talked about? Oh yeah, I wanted to show you our partners at the Herring Center who are doing this work with older grades and older school buildings. Here we go. Just gonna do this while I find this. I don't know, Cindy, if there's anything you want to add in here. I'm just gonna look for this website here.
I was just thinking, I mean, I don't know how many of you work with IEPs, but once children are in school settings, they're on IEPs. And we didn't discuss that much tonight about the goals and things on an IEP and how to help teachers maybe understand what those are, or how to incorporate those kind of learning tasks in their space, because I feel like sometimes they're ignored, which we know isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen. It's just hard to keep sometimes track of everybody's goals. But I do feel like they have that IEP at a glance. It's a one-pager that really does help you identify what specific goals that child is working on that you could incorporate in a classroom. And it's also helpful for parents to know what it is they're working on to do maybe some activities in the home. So in that way, there's a few tips. I love all these examples though, Kristen. It's been so nice. You're like a wealth of information. Just keep bringing it.
I know. This website, and I got to show you this website. And this is our Herring Center website, and we have recorded trainings on here that could be really beneficial for people to look through. And I just if you want to just sort of look through, we do have a whole section of trainings that have been recorded and things about, let's see here, leveraging technologies to support families, student accommodations and modifications in tier 1 settings.
And Kristen, we are at 8 o'clock, a little bit,
Perfect.
1 minute after, but I just
Yes.
wanted to let you know time.
Perfect. Yes. If I really appreciate everyone coming on a Friday night and spending time talking about inclusion and talking about this. And I really appreciate all your input, Cindy, for being here, and everyone in chat who was just really and really engaged in all the questions. And I wasn't able probably to answer every question, but hopefully there's a couple nuggets that you were able to take back and think about for your programs. And I just really appreciate you all being here.
Kristen, thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate Herring Center being involved in this. It's nice to bring, of course, information from sometimes urban settings to the rural areas. I feel like we could really work on inclusionary practices, and I feel like you gave us some great tools tonight on how to build those mission and vision statements on inclusion. And then I agree, it's about planning for it. It doesn't just intrinsically happen, it takes effort. But I will tell you the rewards are fantastic. So thank you again for tonight.